Greetings again to all of you who are watching this series. This is the third lesson in which we shall be dealing with essay writing. More specifically, in this session, we shall be looking at punctuation and spelling, both of which are very important in essays, as you may imagine. Now, punctuation. Why does it matter so much? Punctuation clarifies meaning. We investigated briefly in the previous lesson why it is that punctuation was so important, and I'm going to recap that. When you are speaking to somebody, possibly you are listening to a newsreader on a television, or a sports announcer, or something. A lot of the meaning that we get is not only from what is said, it is how the person says it. He will be using hand gestures. The expression on his face will change. The voice moves up and down in tone. Now, when you are writing, all of that, all of those visual and audio clues are lost. That job is then taken over by punctuation. So let us take a look at the English punctuation which you should be using. Now here is an interesting little task which they gave to us at school, funnily enough, when I was still in Standard 3, which is now, of course, Grade 5. They gave us this one, and they asked us to punctuate it. And, well, I struggled horribly, because if you can see, it's just had. And yet, if correctly punctuated, that sentence has meaning. Now, if you want to see if you can crack it and punctuate it correctly yourself, hit the pause button now. Otherwise, I am going to put the correct answer up on the screen. Are you ready? Here it comes. Take a look at that. And now I'm going to read it in such a way that the punctuation marks will clarify the meaning. Michelle, where Timothy had the marks. Do you see how tricky this is? That is what punctuation is all about. Those few marks that have been added have taken a load of gibberish and made it into a clear, meaningful sentence. Let's move on then. Here are our basic punctuation marks. Let's start with capital letters. Now, for some of you, this will be fairly obvious. For most of you, you will encounter items of information in this presentation which are new to you. So, please take it slowly and hit the pause button whenever you have to, because I am astounded whenever I teach punctuation at how few people have been taught it in this detail before. Right, capital letters. We all know that capital letters are used to start a sentence. That's obvious. They are used for proper nouns and adjectives. That's obvious. And they are used for the first word of direct speech. Now, in other words, I'm going to add something here. Note that the pronoun I is always capitalized. I want to add a comment here. Often, when my guys have written their essays and are getting them back, I will stand up in front of them in the class and I will start to chant. A sentence, when it is written down, must start with a capital letter and end with a full stop or an exclamation mark or a question mark. And they'll all look up at me and they'll say, "But sir, we know that." At which stage I will reply to them, "Then why don't you use that in your essays?" Because this is a fact that many people do not use basic punctuation correctly in their essays, and it's vital. So there we go, there's capital letters. Now let's move on to full stops. Okay, and there I have very kindly indicated in brackets what a full stop must look like. Now, very simple, used to end a sentence. And, the and tells you that the list is about to end. Used in some abbreviations, not all, but some. For example, e.g., humorous, eh? I.e. Do you notice that if you write I.e. down, which stands for id est, that's Latin for, that is. If you write it down without those full stops there, you are going to cause a problem because it's then a spelling error, etc. there. You notice the full stop? It must have a full stop behind it, but more than that, it must be etc. Okay, often I'm starting to encounter etc. written as ect, which is wrong. It's etc., Latin, and so forth. Good. There we are, full stops. Now, capital letters and full stops are the most basic of your punctuation marks. That you probably know. Here comes the third one among the basics. And that is, of course, commas. There we are, there's a comma. Now, take a look here. Commas are used to separate words in a list, all right? They are used to separate phrases or clauses, and they are used to separate introductory words or phrases from the rest of the sentence. Those are the functions of commas. Now, sorry, just before we carry on to semicolons, I want to make a comment there. Commas do not serve the function of joining main clauses together. If you join two main clauses together with a comma, it's known as comma splice error. Okay. Main clauses, well, you'll see how it's done. But remember that a main clause is a part of the sentence that can stand alone by itself. And when you join main clauses together, you are in fact linking two sentences incorrectly. All right? We'll go on now to look at how to avoid comma splice error, because a comma can certainly join a main clause with a subordinate clause, but not with another main clause. Okay, sorry about that. Very important, we encounter comma splice error frequently in the paper 3s. Semicolons. There we are, your semicolon. You can see there. Well, let's just go back slightly. If you had to actually pronounce a full stop would be a. So let's go then. A comma would be, of course, a. So a semicolon is a. You see that? There we are. Good way to remember this. Now, semicolons is where things go wrong. I very seldom see semicolons used correctly in essays, and that is a problem, because they must be used correctly. They are very, very useful punctuation marks. Good. Now let's take a look here. Semicolons create a longer pause than a comma, right? Certainly you'll see that's true. Balance, that should be balance, not balances, equally important ideas, and they are used to connect main clauses, right? So that is clue number one, how to take away comma splice error. You replace the comma with a semicolon, and that's it, problem solved. That's the easiest way to do it. And your other methods, by the way, you can use a conjunction, or you can simply use a full stop and start a new sentence. But either way, eliminating comma splice error, the easiest way is through the use of a semicolon. And really, I want to emphasize this. Semicolons, when used in your writing, look elegant. It makes your writing look as if it's got just this touch of professionalism, extra classiness about it. So please learn how to use semicolons correctly. Get into the habit of using them. Colons, right? These ones are often confused with the semicolon. Nobody is, well, very few people are certain about the correct way to use them. Okay, so please take note here. Semicolons can almost always be replaced by a conjunction, whereas the full colon here cannot be. Okay, it indicates a much longer pause. If you have to indicate the length of the pauses, the comma creates the briefest pause. Semicolon creates a pause about twice as long. And the colon, if you are reading out a script with colons in it, the colon pause should be maybe 3 times as long as that of a comma. It's one of the longest pauses. Colons and dashes and stuff, they give you your longest pauses. Now let's move on. The colon shows, or colons show, that a list is following. Okay, please note that. Always used to start a list. Something like, pay attention to the following details. Okay, and then you'll have your semicolon, your colon, your full colon, and then of course the list will begin. Right, show that the list is following, and used to introduce quotations or explanations. All right, very important that. There's a lot of confusion also in that case between the colon and the comma, because when you are dealing with direct speech, and after your introductory verb, usually you will find a comma, but there are times when the colon is more appropriate. Otherwise, when it comes to direct speech, very often they are interchangeable. Now, let's go on to question marks. There, I very kindly provided you with an example of what a question mark looks like, and I'm sure you never knew that before. I'm being slightly sarcastic today. Now, for what are question marks used? They are used to indicate questions. Isn't that clever? I've made a note there that that is a most axiomatic statement. Duh. The whole thing is, I get asked other questions about that. Is the question mark used, for example, to indicate a rhetorical question? Well, the answer is yes, of course. A rhetorical question is a question. It must take a question mark. Okay, easy as that. Now, let's carry on then to exclamation marks. And once we have dealt with this, we have dealt with all 3 marks that can be used to conclude a sentence. All right? Full stop, question mark, or exclamation mark. Those 3 indicate that a sentence has ended. I'm going to go slightly off topic here, because this is actually a topic for the 10th lesson in the series when we're going to talk about literature. But when analyzing poetry, and when you are checking how many examples of enjambment are in any poem, the easiest way to do that is to count the sentences. And to count sentences, all you do is you look for full stops, or exclamation marks, or question marks, because a sentence cannot end in any other way. So there we are. There's a quick tip for you, and a quick way to cheat when teaching enjambment, or when learning enjambment, which is of course run on lines, when the line of poetry does not end but continues on to the next line or even to the next stanza without a pause. Now, exclamation marks are used to indicate strong emotion. If there's emotion in a sentence, it gets an exclamation mark. It doesn't matter whether it's happiness or sadness or anger, whatever. Exclamation marks indicate emotion, and they are used after interjections. Now, I'm hammering a nail into the wood. And I go bang, bang, whack. And I hit my thumb with the hammer. And what am I going to do? Ouch! Doesn't sound so good in English. Comes out better in Afrikaans, I must admit. But I'm going to shout an interjection. Ouch! That is an interjection, and it will have an exclamation mark after it. Then it also indicates shouting or orders. All right, very often the two are the same thing. That's why I've included it as one phrase there. Clause isn't that? Phrase. I don't think there's a subject there. Anyway, be that as it may, I'm getting very technical now. When you want to show that somebody is shouting, or when you want to show that there is an order, the easiest way to do it, exclamation mark. Okay, moving on. Quotation marks. Now these ones are, there's two different types. And a question I am frequently asked, when do you use the single quotation marks and when do you use the doubles? Especially when you are now writing out direct speech. And the answer is, always when you are writing by hand, use the doubles. Not because the singles are wrong, but because the doubles are more clearly visible. Okay, note that. They are in fact completely interchangeable. But double quotation marks show up more clearly, especially in handwritten text. So wherever possible, go for the doubles. There are occasions when you're going to combine the two, such as when you're quoting within a quote, but that's now getting into the realm of high-tech tertiary level writing. I don't want to go into that now. So let's just look at the function of quotation marks. They are also called inverted commas, right? Exactly the same thing, interchangeable. They are used to indicate direct speech. We know that already. We always have that in exams. And they are used when quoting, duh. Now, parenthesis. Now, parenthesis, there you've got an example of parenthesis. They are more commonly called brackets. And they are used to insert additional information into a sentence or paragraph. By far the most common is when they insert information after specific words in a sentence. Yes, that is the most common, but I have often seen them used in the academic texts to insert further information into a paragraph after the last sentence has ended. I have seen that. It's not rare. No, let's rephrase that. It is rare, but it's enough to make sure that you can understand that it's not only being used within sentences, also within paragraphs. Hyphen. That's the short little line. Let's take a look at this one. It can get quite complex. You see here, it links words together to form compound words. I'll give you examples now of an adjective, or several compound adjectives. And here, used within words to create a different meaning, and used to separate certain prefixes from the root word. Now, at this point, we're going to have to go over to our document camera, and I want to show you some examples of these things. Now here I'm going to use the same piece of paper as I used previously and the same pen, and I have my red pen handy for doing corrections. Let's just say here, I'm going to write a sentence. I am a well-dressed man. Can you see that that sentence can lead to confusion? If I say I am a well man, It's not good English, but it is technically correct English. And if I say I am a dressed man, in other words, if I were to insert a comma over there, it would mean that I'm a man who is not sick and that I'm not naked. It doesn't work. The meaning of the sentence has been lost. Whereas if I write it like this, I am a well-dressed man. Suddenly, we've got a logical sentence with a clear meaning. Well-dressed is a compound adjective. All right, that is the creation of a compound adjective. Let's try another one. I drive a high-speed car. High and speed. Okay? Once again, the creation of a compound adjective to describe the car. Now, I had an interesting experience a few years ago where I saw somebody receiving a written instruction to remark a bundle of papers. Now, the instruction was written as follows. Actually, with a capital letter used. Remark these. And the lady used an exclamation mark. Except that is a meaningless sentence. To make it logical, you would have to write it as follows. Remark these. Can you see the difference there? To remark is to mark again. Whereas if you talk about a remark, and please note that the stress is now on the second syllable. If you talk about a remark, it's a comment about something or about a person, something like that. So there you will see that the meaning has changed completely. Okay? There are various other examples. We don't have time to go into them now, but there you have it. Oh, wait a minute. No, I won't go into any more detail now. But you see how hyphens can completely alter the meaning of a word when they are inserted or omitted. Pay attention to your hyphens. So, there we are, used to separate certain prefixes from the root word, used within words to create a different meaning. Let's move on there. A dash. Now you notice how a hyphen always touches against the letters. A dash does not. If, for example, you're typing a dash on a computer, as I frequently do, when I type it, I end the word before, space, hyphen, hyphen, space, new word, and then the dash is created automatically by the computer. But the point about it, the computer recognizes it because the dash is literally two hyphens standing alone without touching against letters. As soon as they start touching against letters, the computer might not change it into a dash for you. Now let's just take a look here. It's used to separate parts of a sentence with a long pause, and it's used to insert additional information into a sentence. Now, where have we seen this used to insert additional information into a sentence? Bear with me. I'm going to go backwards, and there we are, parenthesis. Used to insert additional information into a sentence or paragraph. So the dash sometimes serves the same purpose as a paragraph. And I want to mention here that I've actually seen exam questions in paper 1 which asked with what other punctuation mark could be used in place of the dash? And the answer there, of course, is brackets. So but the only way you can replace it with brackets is when the 2 dashes are used, not only a single one. Good. Moving on. Bullets. Now, people, I've included this in this list of punctuation marks to tell you, don't use them in essays. Do not use bullets in essays. They ruin the coherence, the flow that you would otherwise have. Bullets are fine in lists. They are not fine in essays. Essays that contain long lists are going to be horrible to read, will be totally non-coherent, and I'm using non-coherent as opposed to incoherent, which means ununderstandable, or yeah, ununderstandable, I think is correct. But bullets are great when used correctly. They have no place in an essay. Please take my word for that, okay? Once again, it stops the coherence, it causes jerking in the flow of the essay. And finally, we have here ellipsis. Right, let's take a look here. Used sometimes to indicate that a sentence has been deliberately left incomplete. You know, I walked up to the door. Slowly I opened it. I thrust the door open, and then ... The rest is left to your imagination. Usually, you will know very well what happened after, for example, the door was opened. But it's not described specifically in any detail whatsoever. Okay, and ellipses are often used in quotations to indicate that some text has been omitted, all right? Deliberately, I mean, if you're using a long quotation and you only want to focus on, for example, 10 words of it, then you will just quote the relevant 10 words, and if there's a gap between them, you'll put in some ellipsis to show you, or to show the reader that some text has been left out because it wasn't relevant. Now, those are your basic punctuation marks. What I want to do next is just to give you a simple task using punctuation, punctuating sentences. And one other thing I'm going to stress yet again. Look here. There's a cell phone. I'm only giving you a few questions. I want you to use your smartphone. Go ahead and Google other exercises of this nature. Practice using punctuation correctly. There must be thousands of tasks, English tasks, that you can find. And if you're serious about getting good exam results, practice for your exams, not only in English. It's not only in the textbooks you get at school that you are going to find the answers for which you are looking. You're sitting with one of the best research tools in the history of man. You're sitting with all this information in your pocket. Use it. Google. Go mad. Burn a bit of data. It's for a good cause. Okay, let's then move on to our nice little task. And excuse me a second, I'm going to see if I can find this punctuation task that I wanted. There we are. Right, I'm going to give you some sentences to punctuate. Now, after every sentence, I'm going to tell you, if you want to take part in the exercise, I'm going to tell you to pause so that you can see if you can get the punctuation by yourself before you look at the answer. This is entirely up to you, all right? So remember, don't cheat. It will benefit you more if you first make an attempt yourself. Now, there's nothing complicated about these. Oh dear, that's not one of the sentences, by the way. I'm sure you can see what's the purpose of the comma in those sentences. And there's also the punishment for people who do that sort of thing. Good. Let's go on to our task here. Punctuate the following sentences. Now there you can see the sentence. See if you can punctuate that. It's not very difficult. You will get 3 marks for a correctly punctuated sentence there. Now, at this stage, if you want to try it for yourself, hit the pause button. Are you ready? Now is the time to pause. Good, welcome back. Now, I'm going to post the correct answer for you. See if you got it correct. There we are. Sentence must begin with a capital letter. Proper noun must start with a capital letter. And this sentence, in this case, ends with a full stop. There we go. And I hope you got the full 3 marks for that. Let's go on to our second one. There we are. Very simple. That's only a 2 mark. And if you want to try to get the answer for yourself, now is the time to hit the pause button. Good. Let us now take a look at the answer. Very simple. Sentence begins with a capital letter, and because it's a question, it must end with a question mark. How do you like this so far? It's not that difficult, is it? Let's try another one. Good. Now I'm going to, once again, give you a chance to pause, which you should now be doing. Good. Here comes the answer. Now you can see how many more punctuation marks have been included here. You've got the capital letter at the beginning, you've got the apostrophe to indicate contraction, and you've got a capital I. You've got a comma there. You may incidentally leave out the comma. The comma is not essential. It just depends on who the speaker is. You've got the contraction requiring an apostrophe. And because this sentence contains emotion, if you're talking about something as absolute rubbish, then obviously you're going to have emotion in your voice. And there you will use an exclamation mark to indicate emotion. I'll leave that on the board for you for a second so you can check your own before we move on. Good. Let's carry on then. This one is slightly trickier than the ones that came before. See what you can do with this. Hit the pause button now. Good, here comes your answer. Aha! You see that? Semicolon. 2 main clauses. Remember we talked about joining main clauses together. And this is clauses of equal weight, right? Or ideas of equal importance. You have done well. You could do better. There we go. Semicolon. That's the correct time to use the mark. Okay, let's carry on. 6.5. And once again, if you are going to work out the answer for yourself, please hit the pause button now. Right, there we go. Let's take a look at our answer now. And here we have the use of the colon. And you see there, please obtain the following. And there's a long pause. A pencil, a ruler, an eraser, and some paper. Now, just for interest's sake, some people use what is called the Oxford comma. And here, they would write a pencil, comma, a ruler, comma, an eraser, comma, and some paper. Is it wrong to use the Oxford comma? No, not at all. The Oxford comma is frequently used to clarify meaning, and certainly if you want to use it, go ahead. It is by no means an error. So when in doubt, go ahead and use that extra comma before the final and. All right? Good, have you all got that? Here is 6.6. See what you can do with that sentence. And if you're going to try to get it for yourself, hit the pause button now. Good, let's take a look. Lots and lots and lots of emotion in that sentence, isn't there? First, you've got your interjection. Wow! Okay, and there's your exclamation mark. And then you've got, this tastes amazing. And again, there's emotion in that sentence, exclamation mark. Easy as that. 2 exclamation marks, and of course your 2 capital letters at the beginning of each. Good. Now for some fun. See if you can crack that one. If you are taking part, hit the pause button now. Let's move on. Here is your answer. I can actually picture this taking place in Parliament. Okay, and there's his classic chant that he was using. But please note, in this case, you're going to need to use a colon, because it's to indicate that a quotation is coming. It's not simply direct speech. This is what Malema said, and you're going to stop before you actually read that out loud or say it out loud. So definitely a colon is required there, and an exclamation mark there indicates that in fact he was giving an order to the president, as I recall. Now, here we've come to the end of punctuation. As I said before, please continue with other punctuation exercises. Go mad on Google, right? Find them for yourself. If you can get hold of old grammar books, such as I have, use them. Use them. The old grammar exercises are excellent preparation, mainly for paper 1, but also for writing in paper 3, especially when it comes to punctuation. Punctuation in paper 3, punctuation in your essays in particular, is critical because it affects meaning. Even if your language, the rest of your grammar is not wonderful, even if your spelling is appalling, as most people's spelling is, and we're going to address that shortly as well, as long as you can make sure that your meaning is clear for your content, you're still going to get a very good mark. Excellent. Let's go on now to possibly the most boring part of this series of lessons. Please don't panic. I assure you that it'll be painless, but you may have to hit the pause button frequently for the next few times and take notes. Let me just get the one that for which I'm looking. Punctuation, no, that's not it. Sorry, this one. There. Here we go with English spelling rules. I assure you that these are very useful, but I am equally aware that this is a massive collection of stuff that is going to absolutely make you dizzy. There's so much information contained here. So I would encourage you to go through this. Feel free. Hit the pause button whenever you feel the need to do so. It's better to go through it slowly and carefully than to try to rush through it and you're not going to take it all in. But here goes. English spelling is difficult and confusing to English home language speakers. I am an English home language speaker, and I am forever in class picking up my cell phone and typing stuff into my WhatsApp to check my own spelling. English spelling is horribly confusing because there are so many exceptions to the rules. and illogical sounds. This is because English is developed from so many different languages. It's got Latin, it's got Greek, it's got German, it's got French, it's got Scandinavian. It's even got Afrikaans, Sotho, and Zulu. All of those are in English. And I'm not only talking about South African English, I'm talking about English throughout the world. A word such as trek or felt is commonly used in other countries. And there we are. It's insane, illogical, and infuriating to everyone else. If, however, you take the time to go through these rules with me, I assure you that you will vastly improve your spelling. These are old rules taken from the grammar books dating back to the 1920s. And this is a sort of condensed list of them. Let's take a look. Oh dear. First, you have to tell me what that word says. There we are. G-H-O-T-I. What does that mean? How are you to pronounce that? Well, let's take a look at how this is spelt. We have the word cough, which ends on a G-H, right? So that G-H there is pronounced as an F. Good. We have the word women. The plural of a woman is pronounced women. Okay, so the O in that case is actually an I sound. And then we have station, where TI is pronounced as sh. And there we have our word. That there is actually pronounced as fish. Isn't that clever? Ha 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 ha. If you think that's bad, wait until you see what's coming next. Now, what is that word there? It might be a little confusing in the beginning, but when we look at the pronunciation of certain words, it will become clearer as we go along. Now, first we have the word hiccup. Hic. The GH there is pronounced as a P. Okay, I'm sure you can see where this is going. Then we have dough. D-O-U-G-H, and the O-U-G-H is pronounced as O. Then we have phthisis. P-H-T-H is pronounced as T. Then we have neighbor. E-I-G-H is pronounced as A. Have you got it yet? Gazette. T-T-E is a T-E. There it is. And plateau. E-A-U is pronounced as O. And so we have the word potato, spelt in a new and creative way. Do you see how easy English spelling is? Right, let's move on. Enough fooling around. General spelling rules, okay? Here's where the boring stuff begins. Sorry about that. This is the only way we can teach spelling, is the old-fashioned way. You learn the rules and you check your examples. Number one, the letter Q is always written as QU. It never stands by itself, okay? You probably knew that already. Number two, no English word ends in V except spiv. A spiv, by the way, is a petty criminal, normally one who deals in stolen goods, okay? And it's not a commonly used word in English anyway. Number three, no English word ends in J, okay? Number four, and here's where it starts to get complicated. We double the consonants L, F, and S after a single vowel at the end of a short word. For example, here we are, call, it's two L's. Tell, two L's. Toss, two S's. Moss, two S's. Stiff, two F's. And stuff, two F's, okay? But now here comes the problem. Look at all the exceptions to the rule. Us, bus, gas, if, of, this, yes, plus, nil, pal. Okay, and this is what drives us mad, all right? It's not the rules, it's all those exceptions, okay? And for those of you who are frantically taking down notes, please hit the pause button now, and otherwise I shall move on. The I or E sound, or E, at the end of a word is usually written using the letter Y. Now, here we go with exceptions. Macaroni, spaghetti, vermicelli, all these things are, in fact, Italian words that we have borrowed into English. Taxi is short for taxi cab. Okay, and of course, coffee and committee. Those words have come in, I think committee is from French or something like that, but there is one or two exceptions. There are one or two exceptions, I should say, to those rules. All right, let's move on, shall we? Regular plurals are formed by adding the letter S. Easy as that. And for example, dogs, horses, monkeys, cliffs. Each one of those, you just chuck an S onto the end, no problem. To form plurals of words with a hissing ending, add ES. Okay, now, hissing endings are S, X, Z, Z, SH, sh, CH, ch, and SS, th. All right, examples: buses, foxes, buzzes, wishes, churches, misses. Okay, not too complicated there, logical enough, great fun to pronounce actually. All, followed by another syllable, has only one L. And for example, there you'll see common words these: also, already, always, although. There we are. Perfectly straightforward there. Okay, let's move on to our next one. Full and till lose one L when joined to another root syllable. Okay, here are your examples. Hopeful, you see, the L's gone. Useful, cheerful, or here, until, right? In each case, ending on just one L, not two. Then, here's where it gets slightly complicated, but the examples will clear it up for you quite nicely. Drop the final E from a root word before adding an ending beginning with a vowel, but keep it before a consonant. Take a look. Okay, love, then you've got loving. You see, it's got a vowel being added. Here, though, it's a consonant, so it becomes lovely, but the E stays. Right. Drive, driving, the E disappears. Driver, the E stays. Rattle, okay, rattling, the E's gone. And rattled, the E stays. You see that? So with a consonant, such as D, it stays. R, it stays. But with the vowel, I, it disappears. Okay, there, a little bit complicated for you, that one. Right. CK, DGE, and TCH, that's K, J, and Ch, are normally used after a short vowel. Here are some exceptions: much, such, rich, which. All right. Short vowels, but they don't have those three consonantal clusters. Actually, that's a consonant and vowel cluster. Anyway, let's move on there. Oh, take note of this one. It's a long rule. You might have to pause it and go back and study it carefully, but it's very valid. Look here. For words ending in both a single vowel and a single consonant, always double the consonant before adding an ending beginning with a vowel. Okay, now that's complicated. However, it's pretty logical. Take a look at this. Stop, stopped. You see that? Two P's and then ED. And stopping. You see that? Two P's and then ING. Flat, flatter, flattest. Two T's, ER. Two T's, EST. See that? Swim, swimmer, swimming. All right? Two M's before the vowel. Another example that we always have in essays is planning. To plan something is P-A-L-N. Planning must take two N's. Okay? Just bear that in mind. There we are. Some of you are now frantically writing this down. Please pause. I'm going to carry on in the meantime to the next one. There. For nouns ending in a single F, change the F to V before adding ES to form the plural. And there are a few examples. Leaf, leaves. Wolf, wolves. But we have exceptions. Roofs, chiefs, and chefs. Words that have come into English, I think, from foreign sources recently. And so they keep their Fs. I can't explain it. You merely have to learn the exceptions. Let's move on. If a word ends in a consonant plus Y, change the Y to I before adding any ending except ing. Isn't that simple? Don't worry, you can pause this and read it again. But let's take a look here. Party, parties. You see the Y is gone, and it's IES. Marry, married. The Y is gone, it's IED. Heavy, heaviness. Y is gone, it's now an I in its place. Funny, funnily. Okay. Now we get, though, the exception, the ing coming. Cry, crying. Hurry, hurrying. You see that? That's when it doesn't change. Let me pause a second and leave you to take that in with great confusion. Good. Let's move on. Now, when the letter C is followed by E, I, or Y, it is pronounced as an S. Otherwise, it is pronounced as a K. For example, center, ceiling, circle, cycle. And then we change over to the hard C. Cottage, age, ream, curious, lever. You see that? Right? So you've got your two pronunciations of C. And you also have the rule, I before E except after C, because otherwise it doesn't soften the C. Okay, let's move on here. Now, the letter G. When the letter G is followed by E, I, or Y, it is pronounced as a J. Otherwise, it forms a hard sound as in gold, gold. For example, you've got gentle, giant, gymnastic, right? That's your J, your soft sound. Then you've got gallon, eyed, glass, and row, the hard G. But then, just to drive you mad, here are the exceptions. Get, begin, girl, give, gear, gift, geese, girth. Okay, so there are a list of exceptions to that rule. Difficult, isn't it? The exceptions are what drive me mad. Okay, let's carry on. If a word ends in the letter O, preceded by a consonant, add ES to form the plural. Okay, there we've got potatoes. You see that? It's a consonant, the consonant T, and then O, so you add ES. Volcanoes, consonant N and an O, you add ES. Torpedoes, consonant D, O, add ES. But here come the exceptions. Pianos, solos, and Eskimos, and there are other exceptions as well, by the way, but we haven't put a full list here. So this is how to make English especially confusing, is when your exceptions more or less equal the amount that adhere to the rule. Now, when the letters OR follow a W, the pronunciation normally changes to that of ER, in other words, All right? Let's take a look. Worm, work, worth, worst, or worship. Okay, so that's sounds. But here come the exceptions again. Worry or worried, war or worn. Exceptions. That's definitely OR sounds, those. Okay, let me just pause there for a minute so you can take down your notes if you're taking them down. Good, moving on. I before E, except after C. This rule applies when the pronunciation is E. Okay, so brief, field, priest, receive, deceive, sealing. All right, here it's the E sound in each case. Here it comes after C, so now the E and the I are switched around, and it's the E that comes after the C. Now these exceptions are when it is not pronounced as an E, it's pronounced as an A sound. So you've got neither, or you can say neither. You've got foreign, you've got sovereign, seized, weird, counterfeit, forfeited. It's pronounced actually forfeited. Leisure, that's an E as opposed to an E. And then you've got your neighbor and way, A pronunciation. Sorry, you've just got to learn the exceptions there. All right. But this rule, just by the way, is I very seldom have to apply the exceptions to that, because the exceptions, the pronunciation is so very different that I don't really get confused. So stick to that rule when in doubt. It will carry you well. Good. Here we come to the sh sounds. T-I, C-I, and S-I are the three spellings most frequently used to create the sh at the beginning of all syllables except the first. Okay, you can't use it for the first syllable. Right, you've got national, patient, palatial, infectious, gracious, ancient, musician, financial, session, admission, mansion, division. That one's slightly harder. It comes out as a sh as opposed to merely a sh. But anyway, you see where this is going. Okay? And you saw that example we looked at earlier, the word station, where they use TI for the fish sound. Okay, moving on. Bear with me, we're almost there. There aren't many more to go. I know by this stage you're absolutely spellinged out. Haha, that's a neologism, I've just created a new word. For words ending in a single L after a single vowel, double the L before adding a suffix regardless of the accent. Now this is complicated. When you have a double consonant following a short vowel, the stress then goes onto that. As this here has been spelt, it should be pronounced cancelled. You see that? But it's not. It's pronounced cancelled. The stress is on the first syllable. Same story here. This spelling is correct, but it is an exception in pronunciation. As it is spelt here, it should be pronounced traveller, but it's not. It's traveller. Same, signalling. It should be pronounced signalling, but it's not. It's signalling. And then, of course, this one is not too much of an exception. It is pronounced metallic, all right? So that one, the pronunciation is logical. But the point is, it's regardless of the stress or the accent, okay? It's always the double L after a single vowel. okay, before adding a suffix. You see how complicated this gets? All right, let me leave that on the board for about 5 seconds so that you can take down your corrections. There, I'm going to move on. If a word of more than one syllable ends with the letter T preceded by a single vowel, double the T if the stress, that's the accent or the emphasis, is on the final syllable. For example, you see this? Regret. Now there, the stress, the accent, is on the final syllable. So there you have to double the T. It's regretted. Admit. The accent is on the second syllable. Admitted. There we are, double T. Omit. Stress is on the final syllable. Omitted, double T. All right. Okay, before you blur, the next one is the opposite of that. If a word of more than one syllable ends with the letter T preceded by a single vowel, do not double the T if the stress is not on the final syllable. And here are some examples. You see that? Visit. Now the stress is on the first syllable. So here it just stays visited. Okay? There's no stress on the second syllable. Limit. And there, of course, is limited. If you double that, it would have to become limited, which just is not logical. It's not an English word. Benefit. The stress is on the first syllable. Benefited. Okay? No stress on the second syllable. No double T. Are you with me so far? Probably by this stage wishing that this would end. Don't worry, it is shortly going to do so. Here is the last one. The word women, plural of woman, is pronounced as women in order to distinguish it from its singular form. If we were to pronounce it as it is written, there would be no difference between the plural and the singular. They would both just simply sound like woman, all right? So we change the sound of the vowel in the first syllable in order to make it more understandable. Please bear that in mind. The plural of woman is women, so that you can clearly distinguish between the plural and the singular. And I shall leave that on the screen as we conclude with this session. This was lesson number 3 in this series. We were looking at English punctuation and spelling. And yes, it's difficult. Yes, it takes a lot of study and practice. But just a reminder, pick up your phone, hit Google on your phone, and find more spelling and punctuation practice exercises. The more you practice, the more ready you will be to write your paper 3, and as a side effect, the paper 1 will also become easier. People, that's that for now. Sorry if the whole thing about spelling was just so boring. Unfortunately, this is necessary knowledge to have. I hope that this benefited you. Please note, benefited, the stress is not on the final syllable, so the T will not be doubled. Thank you for listening. See you again shortly.